want to read this to you and have you follow along and listen carefully. This is a little excerpt, a piece written by Nietzsche called The Gay Science. Gay in the 1800s did not have the same connotation as you know that it does today, so don't think in those terms. It's a famous quote. I'm going to have you listen to it carefully, then I'm going to give you a few minutes to write a short pensée concerning what you think its fundamental meaning is. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace and cried incessantly, "I'm looking for God, I'm looking for God." And as many of those who did not believe in God were standing together there, he excited considerable laughter. "Have you lost him then?" said one. "Oh, did he lose his way like a child?" said another. "Is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage or emigrated?" Thus they shouted and laughed. The madman sprang into their midst and pierced them with his glances. "Where has God gone?" he cried. "I shall tell you. We've killed him, you and I. We are all his murderers. But how have we done this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns? Are we not perpetually falling backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there any up or down, left? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not more and more night coming on all the time? Must not lanterns be lit in the morning? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition? Gods do decompose. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we, the murderers of all murderers, console ourselves? That which was the holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet possessed has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off of us? With what water could we purify ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we need to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must not we ourselves become gods simply to seem worthy of it? There's never been a greater deed. And whoever shall be born after us for the sake of this deed, he shall be part of a higher history than all history hitherto. Here the madman fell silent and again regarded his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern to the ground, and it broke and went out. "I came too early," he said to them. "My time has not yet come yet. This tremendous event is still on its way, still traveling. It has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds require time, even after they are done, before they can be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than the most distant stars. And yet, they've done it themselves." It's been related further that on the same day the madman entered divers churches and there sang a requiem aeternatatiam Deo. Led out and quietened, he is said to have retorted each time, "What are these churches now, if they are not the tombs and sepulchres of God?" Take 5 or 10 minutes, write a pensée, your reflection. Tell me your thoughts about this reading from Nietzsche. His first impressions, either from what you wrote or what otherwise occurs to you. What's your general impressions from this little essay I just read from Nietzsche? Go ahead, Alicia.
Well, I tried to figure out if they were being literal about it, because they cannot physically kill God. So it must be a mental killing, like a rejection kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was really realizing that even if they reject him, that doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. It's just like a suppression of the truth.
Oh, okay.
And so it's kind of like they're sitting in God's lap to slap his face.
Yeah,
in this
that's
case,
good.
try to kill him.
Okay.
So I just kind of thought that was kind of like a failed attempt, because it has no like grounds to stand on or any realm of possibility to stand on. So I was just kind of like,
Good thought.
felt kind of
Chris?
sure.
Yeah. Chris?
Well, it seems like he's talking about how the philosophies of the past 200 years are the knives that have made him slowly bleed to death. And Nietzsche's the first philosopher who shows the world this is what happens when you kill God. You
Okay.
can't kill God and then have a happy, good world like.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. Go ahead.
Was Nietzsche just telling a story to make a point, or did this actually like?
Oh no, he's just telling a story. He's as much a literary genius as a philosopher.
Okay.
You know, yeah.
So would it be fair to say Nietzsche is the madman? Like, is that what he's
Probably.
getting across?
Yeah,
Okay.
probably.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a good insight, right? Good. Jordan, you were going to say.
Well, isn't Nietzsche's whole thought that the idea of God is dead, and not that God himself is physically
Right.
dead?
Right.
The idea of God is dead. So what? I mean, it's why would he be writing this? But this was kind of the question that I was thinking about: is why would he be writing this? I mean, the person in the story kind of made it seem like God being dead was a bad thing, but Nietzsche kind of in his writing makes it sound like it's a good thing. That God is dead, and that we just don't need to, nothing really matters.
I wouldn't say that's Nietzsche so much. That's more people like Marx, Feuerbach, who say God is dead, it's a good thing. Nietzsche says God is dead, it's a bad thing. He sees where this train is heading. You know, the naive view is, hey, if God is dead, we're going to a good place. Nietzsche says if God is dead, we're going to a good place. Go ahead.
No, I should be the one to know this, because I put it on.
That's
But
right.
Would Nietzsche, would he say God actually is real, or would he say that he's kind of an idea? Would he say that his only existence was an idea in our minds, and now that we've killed that idea, now he's dead?
Yeah, Nietzsche's an atheist. And Nietzsche believes, when he says God is dead, he means our belief in God is dead. But he's not so sure but what our belief in God was probably a very good thing for us. Maybe it's good for us to believe in God. And so when you kill that idea of God, what do you unleash within the human situation? And you notice the language he uses here is so powerful. Away, where are we moving now? Away from all suns. We're perpetually falling. There's no place to land. We've just created an empty vacuum. And there's no meaning to it. And we're just falling, plummeting through the abyss. He's not so sure that feels very good. He thinks that's the reality of it. But can we actually survive such a universe that we've created for ourselves? Please.
So was Nietzsche's aim to make people believe in God? There is a God?
I mentioned that the other day. I said that there's been this sort of tongue-in-cheek view of Nietzsche that he was actually a closet Christian, and that he's actually only passing himself off as an atheist to show how ugly an atheistic, true atheism must be. He is certainly, in my opinion, the first consistent atheist. Most atheists are incredibly naive about the implications of their philosophy. Nietzsche isn't. He knows that God has been that force, the belief in God has been that force which has kept the human race in some semblance of orderliness and sanity. And so we just cut that away. What have we just unleashed? That's really what's going on. All right, good thoughts. Well, let me add, supplement. Ben, you'll go ahead, Ben.
We might talk about this later on, but was his whole point of the Ubermensch as kind of a replacement for God, a human rising to the position of God as a standard for morality?
He's been taken that way by many, but I don't believe that's quite fair. Or at least fair only in a fairly limited sense. He doesn't live under the delusion that we sort of have a God within or become gods or something like that. This is not New Age religion, The sort of high priestess of New Age religion in America in the last 30 years has been Shirley MacLaine, the actress. You know that name? She's a little older than your generation. But she was quite a, well-known movie star type person a few years ago, and she got into New Age religion. One of those famous stories she tells is about being with her guru out on the shores of some lake, and he's saying to her, that you've got to find a God within you, and that's really the source of your existence. And then he says, well, try this. I want you to stand there, look out on the sea, and just say, I am God. And surely, this is all kind of part of a movie scene, But it actually happened to her. She tells the story. And so she goes and she sort of sheepishly stands and feels kind of silly. But he says, no, go ahead and say it. So she says, well, I am God. He says, oh, say it with gusto. Say it with conviction. Pretty soon, she's shouting it out there across the waves. I am God! This kind of thing, just over the top sort of deal. And she describes that as like this great sort of New Age conversion she has, that then she walked away a new person with this kind of new sense of self. This is not Nietzsche, Nietzsche is not trying to arouse within us this kind of great sense of being divine down deep inside, and we just need to let it loose and so on. I've always thought with Shirley MacLaine, if you are God, I'd like to see you walk on the water, and let's go out there and, take a stroll on the water. And she didn't do that. She just was announcing her deity there to the waves. But so it's not that kind of thing, in Nietzsche at all. All right. What I want to do is just give you a few, again, of these are Gore's talking points on Nietzsche. So the first of them is, not surprisingly, the first little bullet here is the death of God. This is probably the single point for which Nietzsche is best known. So anybody that knows anything about Nietzsche will typically know that he's associated with that famous phrase, God is dead. Nietzsche is a brilliant literary character, and you need to understand that's why I like Nietzsche. It's part of what I mentioned to you the other day, Nietzsche was the guy that got me interested in philosophy. All these other philosophers, I sort of was going, okay, Hegel, Kant, Nietzsche, whoa, it just kind of grabbed me. And it's this kind of writing. This is gripping stuff, isn't it? And so and this is the way he writes. That's, by the way, who stole my Nietzsche book? Did somebody in this class steal my Nietzsche? I had a little paperback Nietzsche on my shelf, and it just disappeared. Nobody in here? Nobody? You didn't steal it, Ben? No? Okay. I see no admissions of guilt. And I, of course, like Cal Lightman, can tell when people are lying just by looking at them. I see that nobody's lying in here either, so. All right, so I have to check other explanations for my disappearing Nietzsche. But anyway, Nietzsche he loves to tell these stories, and his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, is very readable, very engaging. If you ever have a chance to read something that you might think it's going to be dry philosophy, it is not. It will just rattle you, you know. That's good reading. This is not from that book, as you know, but it's similar to his style. Anyway, on one occasion he tells what he calls the myth of the death of God. And he's kind of styles it as if it were set as an ancient Greek myth. All right, so that's the setting for it. And he talks about in this writing how once upon a time, back many, many years ago, there was a great pantheon of deities. You know, you got your Zeus, Athena, Apollo, all of these deities. And among them was one fairly minor deity, not too important, named Yahweh. And he was just one of the mix, one of the, lesser deities there in the great pantheon of gods that come from the ancient world. And he indicates that on one occasion, this deity, Yahweh, got up kind of in a group meeting and made an announcement. And the announcement that Yahweh made to everybody else was, "Thou shalt have no other gods in my presence." And a snicker went around. And then pretty soon there was a couple of gods that were laughing. And pretty soon everybody in the whole pantheon were all just in uproarious laughter, holding their sides, laughing so hard at this preposterous idea that there should be no other gods before me. And they laughed and laughed until they laughed themselves dead. And the only God left was Yahweh. And Yahweh continued down through the centuries to be the only God until Nietzsche says he finally died, and Yahweh died of pity. That's the way Nietzsche writes. It's just that kind of strange, sort of twisted humor. And that's his myth of the death of God. But on a bit of a more serious note, Nietzsche, when he expresses his views of the death of God, you do get the sense that Nietzsche himself is devastated by it. He originally studied, as you know, for the priesthood, or for the clergy, I guess you'd say. But I think it was his studies in liberal Christianity that led him to the conclusion that there is no God. That Christianity is nothing more than the pursuit of a kind of warm feeling in your heart. But there's, after Hegel, there's no idea of a true God out there. And pretty soon, if there's no God out there, you really don't have a meaningful sense of a God in here. And so Nietzsche, as Christus said it so well, that was a beautiful expression of this, by the way. All of these philosophers were the knives that were killing God. Until finally he's dead in our imaginations, in our theology. And as you know, the 19th century generally saw that as a good thing. Yoo-hoo, yeah, great, we're free from God. That's Feuerbach. God is gone, and now we can just realize our true potential. What a wonderful new dawning of a day this is, a new chapter of realizing coming of age. And Nietzsche says, not so fast. I'm not so sure this is as pretty as you think. And so he's devastated. He is truly a depressing philosopher in some ways, because I think he sees much more clearly the implications of it. So that's the first point. Second point of Nietzsche's philosophy is what's called nihilism. Or nihilism, you'll hear it both ways. which, as you are well aware, is simply the philosophy of nothingness. This follows naturally from the first point. If God is dead, then there is nothing. He does not mean there is nothing in an absolute sense. He grants that we exist and we are something in that sense, but there's no meaning. It's a philosophy of meaninglessness. And if there's no meaning, that means that the following words are meaningless. Words like love, truth, justice, decency, all of those words to which we attach so much meaning, and without which we would say life makes no sense, all of those words cease to have any sort of significance whatsoever. So you'd say that, if you could look at 19th century philosophy generally, here is most of it. Here is a very small part of it. I didn't make my box big enough to draw the face. It's a little bit bigger. Sometimes my pictures are way more trouble than their words. I just want you to get this. He sticks out like a sore thumb in the 19th century. He makes no sense. Everybody's happy. Even Marx. All of these people, are just sort of announcing that the human race is right on the verge of the most glorious, wonderful, utopian, bright dawning of a new day you can imagine, with the sole exception of Nietzsche. And that's why in his day, Nietzsche was viewed as a kind of just, off-the-wall kook, because he was so out of sync with what everybody else was saying. This is this village that we just learned about. All of these people in the village are all kind of chuckling and laughing. Oh, what happened to God? Did you lose him? Is he on vacation? What's going on? And they're just joking about it. And then Nietzsche says, really? You really know what this means? He begins driving the point home, but they don't get it. They don't understand it. What has caused the nihilism? 3 things. These are the causes of nihilism. The first, he says, is what he calls the decadence of the church. And I have to say, as Nietzsche was assessing Christianity in the 19th century, especially as it was dominated by that liberal spirit, he was absolutely right, He was nailing it. The church had lost its way, it had lost its place as a shining light or a guide, some kind of great, help, and it had just become kind of a weak, insipid echo of what was going on in the culture. And so he believed that the church was decadent, that the church had given to people what he called the herd morality. Herd morality, the morality of the herd. Matthew, what is a herd? What do you think of when you think of a herd? A group of animals, an excellent definition. And he thinks we have a herd morality. Can you just take a wild guess? What do you suppose would be the meaning of the phrase a herd morality when applied to humans?
That our moralities are based off of an ideal principle, which is kind of what the group wants.
That is correct. And it's about 2/3 of the answer I'm after, so that's good. What do you suppose he also adds into the mix there that would give us the rest of that pie? It's a morality that is born out of the group. And Ben, resident expert on Nietzsche.
Not only is there not a universal truth for conduct, it's also the individual's wishes are not what's important. It's the entire group, not the individual.
That's correct. That's good. Okay, let me add one other little piece to it. This is kind of the critical part. The herd is the defense of the weak against the strong. The herd is the defense of the weak against the strong. Most people are weak, he says. Spineless, cowardly. Most people are not courageous and bold. A few are. Ever so often you get people that come along, a Julius Caesar, a Napoleon, some of these people who are just way better than the others. More brilliant, more courageous, more adventurous, Alexander the Great. But they're few and far between. And most of these who come along are controlled by the weak. But the only way the weak can control the strong is by getting together into a herd. And the herd then imposes on the strong the morality of the weak. Stupid, insane, innocuous, worthless values like brotherly love, compassion, love for those who are worse off than you are, helping the weak, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked. Those silly values are what the weak foist upon the strong to domesticate them and keep them from being the great people they could have been otherwise. Does that make sense? The herd morality. It's the morality of the weak. So he says what the church has done is foisted onto us an ethic that basically fosters weakness among us. Loving each other, caring about each other's welfare. That's the way that the great, courageous adventurers among us are shackled. So he says what the church has done, he calls the emasculation of man. What does it mean to emasculate a man? What does that mean? What's the meaning of that term? Do you know, Avery, what that word means, to emasculate a man?
Well, there's one just like, if you demoralize a man, you completely unmanlyify him.
That's good. Say that word again, unmanly.
Unmanlyified.
Yeah, unmanlyified. That's a pretty good word, okay? Unmanlyified. Never heard that word before, but it does the job. To emasculate a man is to rob him of his masculinity. There is something that is distinctively masculine. And for Nietzsche, those are ideas of courage, strength, leadership, taking charge, being adventurous, living dangerously, living on the edge, being powerful, not caring so much about pleasing others. All of those things he takes as being masculine. And he says the herd strips a man of his masculinity. It makes him weak. Because if you're weak, you're not a threat. And we are threatened by powerful people. And so the weak want to strip those threatening, powerful, manly men of that which makes them threatening. Wants to emasculate them. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, did Nietzsche think of himself as one of these strong
You know, that's a great question, and the psychology of Nietzsche is a constant source of curiosity. Many people think that Nietzsche's philosophy was at its heart a great assault on himself, because he felt like he himself was so incapable of being what he was trying to sell. His sister was much more Nietzschean than Nietzsche. She was a true Nietzschean, in some ways. I won't overstate that one. This whole deal of the emasculation of man, by the way, is a very interesting thing. We, of course, as you probably know, live in a culture which has been dominated by the so-called emasculation motif. And so all you have to do is watch popular entertainment, watch popular TV, sitcoms, and so on, and you will see a constant underlying theme that the humor is often based on emasculating men. You rarely see a heroic man in the humor, I mean, you've got the Jack Bauers, obviously you've got exceptions to that, but generally speaking, you look at the humor. Now, I don't want to offend anybody, but I want you to get my point. How many times is a cheap laugh achieved in popular entertainment by seeing some guy take a shot in the groin? It's just, you can virtually predict that, you're going to get some humor out of some guy getting something of that experience, right? Now, I just want to ask you the question, when was the last time you saw cheap humor at a woman's expense by taking a shot in the breast? You ever seen that? Does that ever happen? I'm not advocating that, you understand? But do you see the difference? Do you see the double standard in our culture? There is a systematic assault on the masculinity of man. And every time you see an attack like that, as in a sense, a humorous castration of the man, you're seeing something of what Nietzsche was critiquing here. So one should be aware of it, because that is the mark of a sick culture, And it's like the entertainment industry is doing everything it can to strip men of manliness in a humorous way. And we laugh at that. We shouldn't be laughing. We should be weeping, But that's a little bit of a footnote to our present conversation. But in some ways, that's a little bit of a Nietzschean interpretation of what's going on. There's a little bit of truth to it, isn't there? All right, so anyway, the first cause of nihilism, he says, is the church has become decadent. The church has begun to sell a philosophy of herd morality and anti-manliness, and that is part of where this nihilism has come from. The second, he says, is simply the loss of morality, traditional morality. Traditionally, notions of morality were rooted in a notion of God. Nietzsche, by the way, was very moved by, influenced by the Russian philosopher, literary figure, more literature really, Dostoyevsky, Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Anybody familiar with Dostoyevsky? What have you read?
I don't remember the title, but I've read Solzhenitsyn.
Okay, well, Solzhenitsyn is inspired by Dostoyevsky. The famous ones, Crime and Punishment, Brothers Karamazov, Dostoyevsky made some great contributions. In Brothers Karamazov, one of his most famous lines, almost the centerpiece of the book, is a line that occurs in which he simply says this, talking about atheism: if there is no God, all things are permissible. If there is no God, ultimately there are no rules. I mean, we may try to impose rules on each other, But the fact of the matter is, if I'm not ultimately answerable to a God who's going to hold me and call me into account for the life I've lived, then ultimately there really are no rules. If I can get away with my crime, then why not commit the crime? Because the fact of the matter is, there's no day of accounting. And Dostoyevsky sort of hammers that point home. And Nietzsche got that. He was affected by that, and that's where he roots the whole idea of a loss of morality. There is no God, there are no rules. And that's another source of the nihilism that he's really advocating. The church has led us to it. The loss of a morality, liberalism, Hegelian, relativism, and the kind of effects of that in terms of liberal Christianity have led it to us as well. And let me give you the third one, and I won't have time to talk about it. But he would say the third source of nihilism is Darwinianism. And on that, I will have to suspend our conversation to be picked up at a time soon. See ya.